Good morning. Welcome to the Placer County Planning Commission meeting, September 13th. Will you please join me in the flag salute and stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As you can tell, any of you who have been here before, we have a new system in place, and I feel like I'm sort of echoing through the room, so apologize. This is our maiden run on this one, so we may have some issues as we go through, so bear with us. Sue, will you do the roll call, please?
Yes.
Okay, first issue.
Okay, Mr. Hauge.
Here.
Mr. Herzog.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Roku.
Sure.
Mr. Sevison. Mr. Moss.
Here.
Mr. Nader.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, EJ, you're up. Planning Director.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the Commission.
I don't think you're on yet.
See, so this is let me say who I am first. EJ Valdi with the Planning Services Division. As you mentioned, we have a new system in place. Over the last several weeks, our media services team and consultant Conti Construction, they've been here doing numerous upgrades, and I want to call Jeremy Kelly and Greg Courier out, and also Mr. Famini, who is with Conti Construction. They're in the back. They might come out here and everything might go dark, but I want to give them some recognition for all the changes that have taken place. To the left of me, there's a new TV interface that is a link to our Tahoe City office, so people in Tahoe can participate in our meetings. There's a lot of all new high definition that's been incorporated in this system. There's this annotated screen in front of me, also over there, allows us to draw on this. And so, let's see, it's not up there, but it's on my screen. But anyway, that was probably on purpose. They probably haven't given me access to that. But anyway, all the mics are new. There's little menu boards in front of the clerk, also in front of the chairman. So it does a number of things that hopefully as we get more into it, you're going to learn more about this, and it will be a much better interface, not only for us, but for the public. People who come up here to speak, they can plug in their laptops. It will appear on the screen. So pretty awesome system. Greg Courier's right here. Jeremy, where's Jeremy at? He's not going to leave, is he? So anyway, he can hear us. They're back in our control room. So I just want to say, thank you for all your work. Mr. Famini, I just saw him in the room. He's back there too. He's with Conti Construction, like I mentioned before. So thank you to all of them. There's still bugs to be worked out, but I think once we get this thing rolling, it will be a really good interface for us. So anyway, thank you. So, normal business, upcoming board meetings. On September 25th, the board is going to be considering a couple items that you've already acted on. One is the Dry Creek West Placer Community Plan amendment that you recommended approval, and also the FTCRA variance appeal that was denied. That will be going at that board meeting. Upcoming Planning Commission meetings, our next one is scheduled on September 27th. We have a Placer Vineyard specific plan, property 15 small lot map that is coming forward. And then we're also going to hold a draft EIR hearing on the United Auburn Indian Tribal School located in the Penryn area. Out beyond that, there's so many moving pieces with projects. I can't tell you specifically what's going to come after that. We're going to have 2 meetings in October. And then for November and December right now, we just have 1 meeting scheduled just because of the holidays. So if any special meetings need to be done at that time, hopefully we'll learn that in the coming month. So that is all I have, unless you have any questions.
Okay. Any questions for EJ? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Before we move to the public comment, I want to make sure that those of you who have come that want to speak on the housing strategy, that there is a sign up for that. I want to handle this in a very orderly fashion, and so what we will do is when we move to the public comment after the presentation, we will be, I'm going to ask the planning director to read the names off, and you'll come up as your name is read. So I just want to give you a heads up in case you haven't signed up to do that yet. Now for the public comment, and these are, this is an opportunity for the public to bring up items that are not on our agenda, and we'd ask that you hold your comments to 3 minutes. There is, Sue, is there a timer up there anymore? Okay, yeah, I see it now. Okay, right. As long as the light is green, you're good to go. It turns yellow, you have 1 minute to wrap up. I would also ask that as we go into the other items on our agenda, that we also encourage you to try to hold it to 3 minutes. So I wanted to give you a heads up on that so you could think about how you could be as succinct as possible about your comments on those items. So I'll open it up to public comment. Anybody who wants to talk about something that's not on our agenda, this is your chance. And if you give us your name, too, as you come up, too.
Good morning. My name is Jane Wurst. My husband Kurt and I have a ranch that is at the corner of Ore Creek Lane and Bell Road. We have lived and raised cattle on this property for 44 years. I would like to ask the Planning Commission if they have been directly involved in the Hidden Falls Access and Expansion Project.
Not yet.
Not yet. Have you been informed about it? It has been in the planning stages for years.
Not through the planning staff yet. It's possible through, obviously, the publications of the local newspapers that people are becoming aware of it here.
Okay. Well, just briefly, the county has entered into escrow on a 50-acre parcel that is right next to our property on Bell Road. That 50-acre parking lot will be the site of a very large parking lot for 100 cars and 40 horse trailer rigs. And that 50-acre parcel will also be the site of a boarding horse facility, restrooms, commercial concession stands to have bike rentals and sell other merchandise to the public. This will be a trailhead that will access several thousand acres of land that will essentially link the current Hidden Falls with other properties held in trust by Placer Land Trust. And there are trail easements that have been purchased over private property of several thousand acres of Big Hill, which is an area that crosses from North Auburn across into Lincoln. Our home and ranch are right next to the proposed parking lot on Bell Road. We have cattle grazing leases on 800 acres directly behind us to the west. Those leases will end if the proposed expansion of Hidden Falls goes through and the land becomes trails accessed by hundreds of people, cyclists, equestrians, and hikers. We know that without cattle grazing, the fuel load will increase dramatically. We will have no control over that. The county seems willing to sacrifice agricultural land and fire safety in order to satisfy the request for more trails. Without the income from cattle, we are thinking about starting a new business venture. We want to open a horse boarding facility and feed stores. We will also have outside private retail businesses on site, selling tack and renting bikes. I know we are zoned ag residential, but I hope the county will overlook that and find some way around that. Our business will be open from dawn to dusk, 365 days a year, and we are projecting that 500 people per day will come to our business. We will need to have a high-volume well to meet the needs of our restrooms with flush toilets, drinking water for people and horses. Yes, this could strain the already vulnerable aquifers and affect our neighbors' wells, but is that our issue? It's really just another paragraph. Did I mention that Bell Road is narrow and hilly and our property sits on one of the blind curves? I suppose our neighbors and visitors to our business, whether they are pulling a horse trailer or cycling, will just have to drive the road at their own risk. Does this sound ludicrous, or would you approve our business venture? Because this is the business venture that the county is proposing. Please be open-minded and become educated about the proposed Hidden Falls expansion project. Please bear in mind that this is a safe, serene, rural ag community, and this project violates the homeowners' rights to keep their home, property, family, and community safe. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Cindy, would you give it to the clerk, please? And then she'll distribute it.
Can I please request that I be emailed regarding any future meetings?
Come on up.
Affect zoning in our area and agenda items about this.
Should I just go? My name is
You can go
Cheryl Berg, and I also want to imprint some thoughts into your minds before maybe this has even come up to you concerning some of the arguments for and against having this out in such a rural area on very dangerous roads. 49 is already called Blood Alley between Lone Star and towards Auburn. And to have that many people accessing from out of the area that aren't even aware of the traffic concerns, and to add that many people daily onto those access roads are just ludicrous. Some of the comments at the MAC meeting were brought up, and one person, of course, they didn't live in this area, and they live in an apartment in Lincoln, and they think it's, or Newcastle, and they think it's wonderful. And they said, well, there haven't been any fires yet, so, you know, what's the big concern about fires? There hasn't been one yet. And they live in an apartment, and they live across from the swimming pool. Well, our life is impacted by the swimming meets. They have no concern for the lifestyle of the people in Placer County, of these ranchers. And they don't care because they're entitled to go out and hike. And Placer County has so many hiking trails. They can go to Tahoe. They can go to the rivers. They can go anywhere instead of impacting the lifestyle of these people. Yes, it's few compared to the numbers that would maybe use that, but how about Nevada County sharing in on the parking access? Placer County already has a parking access. Nevada County could have a parking access up there. Let's go that route. Or man in Lincoln already said he'd sell their land, but they'd have to go 3 miles to the place. Well, they already want to hike, so they'd have a 3-mile hike first, and then they'd be on their way. I mean, what's the difference? They would just warm themselves up. But to impact these people and their lives, this is what they are. Another man said, well, ranchers just sell their land so it can be built on. No, not these people. These people want to ranch. That's their lifestyle. And I know it's just a few compared to the people that think they're going to hike here, but in this country that we just sacrifice for other people's wills. It's the entitlement. I have $500. Well, you have $500. Well, I want 50 of it, so I'm just going to take it. I mean, that's the mindset. And I just hope you consider this when this comes before you, who you're going to care about, who you really represent. And I know it's just a few people out there in respect to the numbers that would use it, but do they have a right? It's different than a sewer line or a... Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else want to make a public comment?
Good morning. My name is Susie Brown, and I live in Newcastle, 50 years. And we belong to Auburn Valley Country Club for probably 40, 50 years, something like that. So we travel that road regularly where this proposed group is going to be. My husband and I were over in another county last week, 2 weeks ago, and the same thing happened in that county. And they call that open space. And they said it has been a complete disaster with people coming in, leaving their garbage. And bottom line is this is going to cost somebody something, and it's going to be the residents of Placer County. Just a proposal alone for the parking is extremely high. So I do urge all of you to take this because you are residents here, and it will affect you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to close the public comment. And I will say that item will come before us at some point, so stay tuned. Okay, we'll move on to our consent agenda, and I'm going to ask the planning director to comment on that because we
So
have
we
some
have,
changes.
Chairman, we have two items that we want to pull off the consent agenda. Item D, the Kemper Woods item, and then also item E. So I would ask that you take up the remainder of the consent.
I'm not sure everybody could hear you. I don't know what's going on over there.
Can you hear me? All right. So
not sure.
I'll repeat myself. Item D, Kemper Woods, and item E, Morgan Knowles. We're asking that you pull that off consent and hear those items separately.
Okay, all right. Okay, what's the pleasure of the commission with the remaining part of the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we approve the consent agenda minus items D and E as in the...
All right. Second. Got a second? Sue, roll call.
Okay, I have a first by Mr. Moss and a second by Mr. Sevison. So Mr. Hauge,
Yes.
Mr. Herzog,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Rokucci,
Yes.
Mr. Sevison,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, now for the two items that were pulled.
So item D, which is the Kemper Woods item, that one I'll handle and ask that you continue that item just so that extension of time could be properly noticed. The notice did not include all the entitlements that were part of that extension request, so I would ask you to take action to continue that to the next consent agenda on September 27th.
And we need to vote on that.
Yes, sir.
So, okay,
Second.
got a motion and a second. Did you catch that, Sue? It was Larry and Andrew.
I have a first by Mr. Sevison, a second by Mr. Hauge. So Mr. Hauge,
Yes.
Mr. Herzog,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Rokucci,
Yes.
Mr. Sevison, Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
The next item, item E, is Morgan Knowles residential subdivision. I'm going to ask Nick Trefiro with planning staff to come up and present that item. That's just to correct a date that was wrong in one of the findings. I'll have him present, and then this is something that you'll open up for public comment. Thank you.
So Nick,
Nick.
are you going to update us on this?
Yes. So good morning, Nick Trefiro with Planning Services Division. So the item I have before you today is the Morgan Knowles extension of time. The applicant's requesting a 2-year extension of time for a previously approved tentative subdivision map, and this is for a single-family residential subdivision, and also a previously approved variance to increase the allowable building coverage on the lots. The tentative map was originally approved by the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors in 2015 and supported by a mitigated negative declaration. So the property is located in the northeastern corner of Olorga Road and PFE Road in the West Roseville area. Access to the site is from Olorga Road, just north of PFE Road. Hidden Crossing Subdivision is located to the north and east, and Riello Vineyard specific plan area is located to the west. Tentative map shows 61 single-family residential lots proposed on a parcel measuring 16.4 acres. County did receive public comments from 2 residents of Hidden Crossings. Their concerns were regarding speeding through Hidden Crossings and also construction traffic associated with this project. The commenters were referred to the Department of Public Works and Facilities to address their concerns. So overall, the applicant has demonstrated due diligence in pursuing implementation of this project through the preparation of improvement plans. Therefore, staff recommends Planning Commission approve the extension of time. However, I wanted to note that before moving forward with this recommendation, that the CEQA finding that has been amended to provide the correct date that the mitigated negative declaration was adopted. So as you can see on the screen, the CEQA finding in the staff report indicates the mitigated negative declaration was adopted on March 19, 2015, when it was actually adopted on June 16th of that year. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Nick? Seeing none, thank you. And I'll open it up for anybody from the public that would like to comment on this. Okay, seeing no one, bring it back to the commission for discussion or action.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that I'm sorry.
Got to turn you on here.
Too many things to do. That we grant the extension of time for Morgan Knowles tentative subdivision map as outlined in the agenda.
Subject to the amended plan?
Yeah. I didn't see that.
That was added.
Okay.
Subject to the amended, okay. All right.
I'll second that.
Okay. Roll call, Sue.
I have a first by Mr. Sevison, a second by Mr. Moss. So Mr. Hauge,
Yes.
Mr. Herzog,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Rokucci.
Yes.
Mr. Sevison, Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mr. Nader.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, before we move to our timed item, our 10:05 item, I'm going to ask before we start this, some advice from legal counsel, and then ask the commission to decide what they would like to do on this. But I would like to propose that we flip the two items that we've got and have the tiny house first. We passed the 10:15 time frame, and the request will be somewhat clear as we kind of move forward if the commission decides to do that. Is it appropriate to do that, Clayton? I need your...
Yes, as long as you're past the 10:15 time frame, you can switch it.
Okay, I'll ask the commission their pleasure on changing that to addressing the tiny house first before the housing strategy. Any comments?
What's the reason for that again?
Okay. You want to help me with it, DJ?
I could jump in. So on the tiny house item, since it is past 10:15, staff just in the last 48 hours received a number of comments that we feel we need to go back and address to see if we need to make any changes or response to those comments. So we'd like to bring you back a full package. So what we're asking is that you continue this item to an open date. Hopefully we can bring this back in the next 30 to 60 days once we address all the comments. You have copies of those comments in front of you. So that's what our request is right now.
So that's the reason behind it. So I'm just going to ask if you're okay with kind of flipping those items. Because
I'm okay for the switch.
Okay. Am I hearing?
Yeah, well, I guess when I came to the meeting this morning, I guess it's up to the commission, but I was hopeful that we would at least have somewhat of a hearing on it so that, if there's issues out there that could be dispelled, then we would kind of put those aside and deal with the bigger issues that have to be dealt with. But so I guess my opinion would be to go ahead with some form of a presentation on it, but I'll go with the commission on it.
At this point, all I'm asking is just, can we flip them as far as the presentations? And I'm seeing some heads shaking, so I'm going to take that we have consensus to do that. And before we do address it, I would like county council to kind of address where we are on this one. Clayton?
So just wanted to make sure we are now hearing the tiny house
The
item
tiny
first,
house,
right?
yes, I'm sorry, that we have opened that item for discussion.
So the tiny house item, my understanding is staff reached out to most everybody that provided written comments on that item to let them know that they would be requesting the continuance. That happened at some point yesterday afternoon. They may not have reached everybody, but I think they tried to. The concern with opening it for an informational session here would be that the people the staff reached out to and notified them that we would be requesting a continuance, those people may not have shown up for today. And therefore, it may not be fair to go through a process that involves information on this that they wouldn't be able to be a part of.
Okay, so let me just kind of frame this a little bit more. So if we open this just even as an informational item rather than an action item, then we have to open it up for public comment as well. So then these people who didn't show up because they were informed that we were going to postpone this item would be very frustrated that they didn't get a chance at that public comment, is what you're trying to say. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So
We'll see if there's anybody actually here to speak to it.
well, I guess that's a good question, Jeff, just to ask is, by a show of hands, how many people came here just exclusively to talk about tiny houses? Just exclusively. We've got a fair number here. So this is really ultimately the decision of the commission. I mean, council is obviously advising us. There, could be potential action based on whatever our decision is. So, discussion.
Well, to me, I think it's probably too bad that some of the folks were kind of advanced knowledge that maybe we wouldn't be continuing this today and maybe didn't show up, but we have several people in the audience that did show up that want to hear about it. And, I think, probably we're likely to continue it at the end of any discussion, but at any rate, any issues that the folks that didn't show up today, when we have the final hearing, they'll be able to provide their comments at that hearing too.
Right. So if the commission did elect to continue this, there would be an opportunity for public comment at that point. And I don't know if staff would be willing to, anybody that showed up today would be willing to notify them of the continued date. So they will be able to have an opportunity to provide public comment if it is continued. So it's just, I guess, more a question of whether that comment would be today or later.
How were those people informed? Was it an actual public notice, or they got in?
No, so we received several letters via email, and so it was all email response. Late yesterday. So just to add one other thing that we may be able to do is for those people who are here, we do have a sign-up sheet just for the tiny house that we can get everybody's information. So if this is continued, we can make sure there's notified directly about the next hearing.
I guess I could ask the question of those who submitted written comments and were potentially informed, those folks. Is anybody here just decided to go ahead and show up, even though they were informed? I see one hand at this point. And you communicated with, what, about 5?
I believe there were 6.
6. And we have 1 here.
So,
okay. Again, this is a decision by the commission. Larry, you want to say something?
Well, I'm a little concerned that we should, if there's people in the audience that had planned to testify today that couldn't come to another meeting later on, that they be allowed to testify today and then move on and continue it to a time certain. That way, you've captured everybody's comment that's available. So often people make arrangements to come at a designated time and aren't able to come another time, and I think they should have an opportunity.
Okay, let me just jump in just for a moment before we get more comments. The reason I wanted to flip these items is in case we did decide to postpone it, I didn't want those people who came exclusively for the tiny house to be very frustrated that once we went through the long process of the housing strategy to find out that we were going to punt that one down the road. So that's why my thinking behind that. I didn't want to frustrate you people. But I know you've taken time out of your day. Some of you may have taken time off of work to be able to be here to comment on it, so I want to be sensitive to that. It is highly likely that what you have been reviewing as far as the tiny house ZTA at this point is going to change, I won't say substantially, but there's going to be some changes about it so that issues that you may bring up today may be out when it finally comes back to us in the next 30 to 60 days. So I'm just kind of throwing that out for the commission and for you as well, that some of those, if you have an issue with it, then it may leave over the next 30 or 60 days.
My 2 cents worth, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Out of no disrespect to the people who have come here and taken time out of their day to speak on it. We have legal counsel here for a reason, and I hate to get good legal advice and then ignore it. I think we have to worry about how the process is followed, so that when we do pass something, it doesn't just wind up in litigation and put on the shelf for a long period of time. And so my preference would be that we not hear it today.
I'd like to echo what, geez, Jeff, I'm agreeing with you again. I don't know, you hope you don't have a coronary. No, I put my hat on if I had come specifically, or I was specifically interested in this as a general member of the audience, and I was notified by staff, I mean, not just by a rumor, but by staff that it was going to be postponed, and I didn't show up. And then I read in the paper tomorrow that, by golly, there was some testimony, although it's going to be continued. I'd be mad. I mean, I know this kind of like it turned out like maybe everybody should have got notified, but I think we should continue it, and that's the way I feel.
Well, then, okay, I appreciate it. Unless there's other comments, what I would suggest is that somebody make a motion based on whatever their desire is, and let's see where it goes as far as, postponing this to a date.
I'll make the motion that we at least have an informational hearing today.
Which means a public comment goes along with that. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion to get it on discussion.
Okay. All right. We've got a motion and a second. Sue, how about a vote?
I have a first by Mr. Johnson, a second by Mr. Sevison. Mr. Hauge?
If it works. Yes.
Mr. Herzog?
I'm a no.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Rokuchi?
No.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
No.
Mr. Nader?
No. Okay, based on that, we have the quorum that says that we will take staff's advisement and county council's advisement to postpone this to an open date. Clayton, do you have any other comments you want to add to that?
There was a motion made to hear the informational.
Right.
Apologies. There was a motion made to hear the informational item, and that motion didn't carry, so there would need to be a second
we
motion.
need another motion for
continue it.
continuance. Okay, somebody want to do that? I see some people reaching. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we continue this item based on staff's advice and council
To an open date.
to an open date.
I'll second that.
Okay. We'll vote again.
I have a motion, a first by Mr. Herzog, a second by Mr. Moss. Mr. Hauge?
Yes.
Mr. Herzog?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
No.
Mr. Rokuchi?
Yes.
Mr. Sevison?
Yes.
Mr. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Nader?
Yes. I do apologize to those of you who came specifically for the tiny house. You might find the housing strategy interesting, so you might want to hang around at least for the presentation and see where that's going, because that's going to have a huge impact on our housing issues, including tiny houses. So it might be worth your time to wait a few minutes through that presentation before you decide to take off. So, Shauna, you are up.
Good morning. I'm green. Can you hear me?
I think I can.
Okay. So, good morning. I'm Shauna Purvines. I'm a principal planner with Planning Services Community Development Resources Agency. I'm going to go back a little bit. I am putting a test to the technology today with a couple of tricks in the PowerPoint. So, luckily, I have
Is
support
somebody loading
here.
that?
Huh?
Is somebody loading that now?
We actually did. This is going to be loaded off the laptop as opposed to the back. So as mentioned, I'm going to just be providing an update on the housing strategy and development plan. I'm also going to talk a little bit about, particularly for our newer commissioners, just kind of how we got here and some of the board's priorities and work in the CEO's office to kind of round out just the overall county effort on housing. I think I start go here. So as I've mentioned in the past, as part of my updates, a little over a year ago now, the board set housing or affordable housing as a priority for the county. The CEO's office, to support that direction by the board, established a multidisciplinary, multidepartmental housing unit. And that unit is made up of members from the county exec team who oversees the unit, economic development, community development, Department of Public Works and Facilities, and Health and Human Services. As we got started last year, what was decided as part of the unit is that we wanted an annual work program, and that was first for housing in the county. So in August, well, actually I'll stop. The housing unit actually did establish 3 priority goals. One was to eliminate barriers and identify ways to accelerate development of a variety of housing so that a home is attainable by people of all income level. Improve employment growth by reducing critical labor shortages due to the lack of available housing, and to shorten commute distances for those who live and work in Placer County. So those are kind of our guiding principles that we use as we go through and look at the things we do. But everything that we do actually is grounded in the county's housing element. Housing element is one of 8 mandatory elements for the general plan, and it's the only element that's required to be established and signed off by the state. There are actually 11 goals outlined in the adopted housing element that was approved by the board in 2013. We've just highlighted 4 of them here for you, which is provide new housing, encourage that construction of housing, promote housing opportunities that meet specific or special needs, and to meet housing, a variety of county residents for all backgrounds and income levels. So as I mentioned, the unit actually pulled together an annual housing work program that was approved by the board on August 8th of 2017. It was broken into 4 different components: planning and research, incentives and regulations, funding and resources, and legislative advocacy and communication. There were 30 tasks associated with that program. I'm happy to say all 30 were implemented. And or at least initiated. Many of them have been completed. So we are planning on taking back to the board on September 25th the next annual work program, which does prove to be as robust as last year. And I'll talk a little bit more about what's to come in the year. So some of the recent accomplishments that we did out of that was we did commit to a 3-year partnership with the Mountain Housing Council. This was a result of a Tahoe Truckee study through the Tahoe Truckee Foundation. We also updated the second dwelling ordinance to bring it consistent with recent changes in state law. We completed an existing condition study, and I'll talk more about that, and a jurisdictional comparison report. We also finalized the Tahoe and South Placer economic and housing profile reports. We expanded our website. We updated the county's legislative platform in support of housing. We took a trek to Vail, Colorado, where we learned a little more about mountain housing needs, particularly in tourism-related areas. And we completed our contract with Whole Person Care. We did a survey of second homeowners in eastern Placer County, where we know about 60% of the home stock there is owned by people as a second home, not as a primary residence. And we entered into a partnership with Mercy Housing to assist with the development of 79 affordable units here on the DeWitt campus, or the Placer County Government Center. We also worked with the developer out of Shaffer's Mill, where we secured a little over $16 million to support 56 units up there. We were awarded that just about a month ago.
Congratulations.
That will also, yeah,
great.
It was a good one. It also actually supports increases in transit services and trail improvement in that area. So it touched on a little more than even housing for that one. And then we did apply for our No Place Like Home, and we started kicking off some project improvement processes through the Community Development Agency. And then we also, with assistance through funds we received from Sutter Foundation, purchase an 18-unit apartment building to help with permanent supportive housing. So it was a very busy year last year. But what I wanted to talk about mostly today was the Housing Strategy and Development Plan. Within those 30 tasks, there was a group of those tasks that were really related to land use, ordinances, general plans, and funding. And so what we did is we pulled those all together and we called those the Housing Strategy and Development Plan. So they are a component of the county's annual work program. And this one is being managed under Community Development Resources Agency. So what the plan does is it addresses policies and processes associated with the shortage of available housing and housing choices in Placer County. And we know, and as we have learned over the last few years, implications of a sustained undersupply of housing will increase upward pressures on sale prices and rental prices. It's pretty basic supply and demand efforts out there. It also does, though, create a barrier to worker retention and economic development. We are starting to hear pretty regularly the impact of a lack of housing on our businesses in that they're just not able to secure their employees, and that's both in eastern and western Placer County. So the plan identifies ways to improve those local controls to address the housing crisis. It approaches the problem by targeting 4 main focuses: creating more incentives to build affordable and workforce housing, changing regulations that make building housing easier, advocating for state and federal funding assistance, and furthering partnerships for meeting regional housing needs.
Sorry.
Technical problem. Okay, we're good.
Okay. So there are 4 components also of the housing strategy and development. The first one was just to do an assessment. We needed to know exactly what we were working with and what we had. So it identified what our existing conditions were, what our housing needs were, and what our development opportunities were. Just really fundamental information. We also looked to other jurisdictions where we discovered best practices and then pulled together a recommendation report for what those changes might look like here at Placer County. We also developed a site evaluation tool to determine which sites are probably most likely to be developable. The county has something near 80,000 residential parcels in the county. When we really took it all down and really looked at those that met developable goals, we're looking in and around about 100 parcels. So it's not a lot of parcels that we are really focused on, but what the tool does is when we do have funding sources that are coming our way, we can kind of rank those parcels on which ones we think are going to be most competitive for those funding opportunities. And then the last one is to review state housing policy changes to ensure that we remain consistent in conformance with state law. That has been no easy challenge over the last couple of years. Last year there was a lot of talk about the governor's package of 17, and there was actually 150 bills that went through review last year, and over 33 were amended. This year it looks like it may not be quite as robust as the 2017 package, but there's still a number of changes that are coming down that may necessitate us to modify our policies and regulations just to stay in compliance with state law. So I'm going to spend a couple of slides just kind of breaking down the existing conditions and what we found. The first one we just looked at overall housing production. And we looked at the average rate of production Placer County has been producing since 2004. On average, we're about 300 units per year in the unincorporated area of Placer County. When we looked at our growth forecast, both our population and our employment needs, it was determined we were going to need about 13,480 or 13,500 units by 2040. So if we stick to the rate that we're actually going right now, at the roughly 300 units per year, we're going to have a shortfall of about 8,000 or a little over 8,000 units. Now, at any time, this can be changed. It was definitely a snapshot in time. If there were to be a rapid growth, a large employer, if there was another recession, that would change that number. But this at least gave us a snapshot of what we're looking at. We also looked at household income distribution to determine what type of household needs and costs that our own employers and our own residents could afford. And so it's you can see there it's kind of broken out, Placer County as a whole, Western, Central, and then Eastern County. But about 70% or so are in the are less than $100,000 income range. That would equate to about a $350,000 home, which would be affordable to them. We also looked at the full build-out capacity under existing conditions. So no land use changes, no zoning changes, just exactly what we have here today. And so the first three lines, I'm hoping this works. It does. So the first three rows here, specific plan subdivisions and permitted parcels, these are only entitlements. These lots do not exist today. The only ones where we actually have parcels that are available today to look at that development or to address the housing need is here in the vacant sites. So we have roughly about 10,000 single-family parcels. We have, when you multiply based on the maximum allowable units on each of the multifamily sites, we could see a maximum amount about 13,000. We've estimated about a little over 6,000 secondary units are possible should a primary unit want to build that. The unknown is they are within older specific plans. It was clear that the units were allocated, but wasn't clear if they were single family or multifamily. So we didn't want to lose the units, but there's definitely more research that we would have to look there. And those are primarily over on the eastern side. As far as the 13,000, these are commercial properties and multifamily properties are what make this total up. And as I stated, it actually looks at the maximum allowable numbers. When we apply some of the density limiting constraints on each of these parcels, whether it's just community plan limitation in density or it's setbacks or lot coverage or height limits, then that number goes down to about 3,000 units. So the additional density limiting ordinances or policies definitely play a role in the maximum amount of units that we would be able to accommodate on our commercial and multifamily lands. Wrong button. One of the other things we did is we also broke down the actual cost of housing development. So in Western Placer County, we looked at the various different types of development from rural residential, low-density residential, medium-density residential, and high-density residential. In Eastern Placer County, we did it somewhat the same, but we actually looked at the cost of a single-family home. And what we discovered was that the bulk of the cost of creating or constructing new units is labor and materials by far. The land costs, particularly in the eastern side, are also fairly high. And then the soft costs, or that lower kind of light blue section, those are things like real estate fees and those. The top in the red are fees. Now, for the most part, fees are what we regulate, what we control. We don't have as much control over labor costs or material costs or even land costs, unless it's, of course, our property. But that didn't stop us. We actually are looking at ways where we might be able to help reduce the cost on labor and materials by looking at alternative materials that could be used and ensuring that there are paths forward through our building and planning process. And then as far as land cost goes, we are looking, as part of that land inventory, we took a close look at the county's inventory and the properties we have to determine what may be able to be used for affordable housing. And then, of course, we're also looking at our fees.
Shauna, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Since we're on this screen, is if I'm looking at this right, the high density, as far as the fees, is 17% versus 12% on the highest one. So if we're trying to encourage higher density, wouldn't we want to try to accommodate that with maybe some fee incentives?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the county does have a fee offset and waiver policy. It was rooted from the redevelopment days, so it is on our to-do list to update. In many cases, they are impact fees, so we do have to find other fees to offset those revenues. But it is something that is on our work plan, is to
I think we have
update that
another
fee.
question too for you.
Sean, the $237,000 number for the high-density residential, I mean, is that still figuring it being a single-family detached dwelling? Or
No, multifamily.
So you're saying $237,000 a door for like an apartment building?
Yeah, that with the cost of construction, that's what we are seeing, plus the cost of land. These are actual costs associated with different projects, so we were able to actually look at projects and break down. They're real numbers, yeah, from actual projects that went on the ground.
I think one of the things that distorts this number are mitigation fees, because they become so cumulative for high-density projects because of the bus service you got to provide or whatever it is in some areas, that I think it makes it unusually high. And somehow we need to find a way to taper that, or you'll never get any of them.
I'm just not sure that a 100-unit apartment building is a $23 million project.
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but I just.
I mean, looking at what they're selling for,
Well,
I'm confused.
okay, well, let's let John continue there. I guess we'll leave a question mark on your numbers.
And we can always update those numbers and look at new costs as we go too. So once we felt like, okay, we had a good understanding of what was today, what parcels we had to work with, what the costs were going to be associated with that, what the demand and the needs were as we looked at forecasted growth. We had a lot of questions, and we had a lot of questions we wanted to ask others. And one of them was, is there a need for more or less for sale or rental homes? What is the product type that people are looking for at the various income levels? And then what product types are missing that we're not currently building on a consistent basis? And then what and where are the opportunities for housing development? What are the barriers to housing development? And then what are some of the solutions or tools that would facilitate housing, especially workforce housing and that middle income housing? So at that point is when we started to do some public outreach. And this is not by far over. We have not closed public outreach. It's always open, and we're going to continue to do it. What I'm providing you is just kind of what we have done to date. So we first, probably before the county really kicked off last year with its effort, it was the Tahoe Truckee area that established the Mountain Housing Council. And they kicked off what they called tiger teams that looked specifically at housing sites, fee studies, achievable local housing definitions, and then some advocacy and outreach efforts. Last March, we held here in this room a housing forum. This was a joint forum with the Placer County Community Foundation. We had roughly 75 in attendance to learn about the existing conditions, many of the data and information I had just provided for you. And it gave that opportunity for the public to provide feedback at that time as well. And then we did, over the spring, went out to the municipal advisory councils and presented them with the information or similar information that went to the forum. Following that, we did some stakeholder interviews and some project fact sheets, updated our webpage. We did some focus work groups with housing project applicants, people that have physically put applications through the process, so we could find out where they felt there were some barriers to development or through the process. We did some focus work groups with housing advocates and other stakeholders. And again, if any, we are still here to meet, and we still are here to learn. So if there are others that would like to meet with us, and we will continue to be reaching out, that will still be happening. And we also established the housing newsletter later last year, and that very quickly took off. As of August of this year, we had over 6,600 people who have registered to receive the Placer County Housing Newsletter. And then much more recently this summer, we released Flash Vote. And we did 2 of these. These are brief surveys on housing cost, design, and choices is what we did this round. It's kind of based on lessons learned and what we had, information we had gathered before. In total, we had 5,549 responses. 3,354 of those responses were from people locally who lived here in the county. And we had a total of 1,653 unfiltered responses. This was free flow. They just got to tell us what they thought as part of it, as opposed to answer specifically the ones that answered the questions that we provided. Overall general interest was an interest in smaller homes and then streamlining the permit review process. So this is where I'm going to get tricky. So the first one, we did housing costs and needs survey. It was a quick, what we thought was a fairly quick 5 question survey. I think it's pulling up. Oh, this is where I had to switch. There it is. And we were really just checking to see, what people really thought. Please, we asked for them to rate how expensive or inexpensive they thought housing in Placer County was. As you can see, overall majority felt that it was slightly or very expensive in Placer County. We also asked if they agreed or disagreed with the following statement: the range of housing costs in Placer County should match the range of people's income. Again, for the most part, definitely closer to the middle, agreed or strongly agreed that the homes that we should be looking at should be commensurate with the incomes that we have in the area. How much do you agree or disagree with the following statement also? Placer County should remove barriers to building a smaller and less expensive units. We did find a fairly strong agreement with that. And then best describe how you feel about building new housing in Placer County. Smaller and larger units really came out to be treated equal. So again, what we really heard was they wanted us to look at the barriers to the development of housing. And then, as I mentioned, we had a number of responses. This is available for anybody to look at. It's just on the web link, and we're happy to. Those are actually on the housing webpage, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But anybody else can get those too.
I think this has been very effective to get, certainly a somewhat of a sense. It's not scientific necessarily, but it gives you sort of a flavor of people who may be tuned in on this issue. And if there are people who would like to be on it, how do they get on it on your newsletter? And
I'm going to get, that's my very last slide.
Okay, fine. I'm going to jump forward,
exactly
sorry.
How to stay in touch and listen to things. The second survey was definitely on housing choices. This one we spent more time on really trying to dive into what types of housing choices people wanted. Oh, okay.
That's a little hard to read.
Here.
That works. So in this one, we kind of hearkening back to the last one where people really talked about less expensive housing. We talked about how they thought we should probably get there. We talked about making it more flexible for people to build those smaller units, reducing some of our requirements like parking, open space, but we were fairly specific on that one. It wasn't generally just to eliminate or reduce open space. It was more when these are in association or near or adjacent to existing open space or parks that are already limited. Require a minimum number of units as part of new development, speed up overall, use tax money. That didn't seem to be a fan favorite. And allow smaller lot sizes. So, and there was another ones. I won't go through each one of them individually with you today unless you would like me to. But under each one of these, we took the time to ask for kind of unfiltered responses, just because we thought it was an opportunity to really hear what people thought. Because, maybe the 5 choices or 10 choices, wasn't broad enough, and we definitely wanted them to be able to go into that. So I will get back out to my PowerPoint.
Let me help you with that.
There is, yeah. Sure.
I just wanted to ask you, had you brought this presentation to TRPA, governing board, or to the staff at any time?
Staff is, yes, aware. We're actually working with TRPA right now to talk about when it would be a good time to bring it to them as well. But we are working with them specifically for the Tahoe Basin Area Plan to talk about where we might be able to, consider some changes to the recently adopted plan that may release some of this. Yeah.
In addition to that, I would encourage you to maybe think about doing a presentation to the Tahoe Conservancy, which I also represent the county on. And I brought up the discussion that we have acquired, I think it's 13,000 lots over the course of time that have utilities, streets, buildable lots. And I suggested to the executive director the other day that we needed to look at unringing that bell that we've bought all those lots and maybe make them, at least part of them, available, the ones that are buildable. And he wasn't thrilled with my idea at all. And I guess, once we get set in that atmosphere, you don't want to change it. But I think they need to, for other reasons, maybe unring that bell to some degree to make room for like low-cost housing and employee housing and so forth, because it's exacerbating our traffic condition to the point where you're not going to be able to drive on the street pretty soon because there's going to be so many cars commuting from Nevada and other places. And so we've got to do a sales program, not only with the Conservancy, but probably at some point with the state legislature and maybe even the governor's office. But at any rate, for us at the lake, that's about the only real bank of units or lots that's available, because we've bought everything. And now we've suddenly found out we've kind of overdone it a little bit, maybe, and when we've prejudiced the ability to provide workforce housing and that kind of thing. And it's had the effect of driving housing costs up so high that a worker can't afford a house there, even if he could buy one. And so it's a catch-22. We've got to figure some way through the morass. And I would encourage you to come talk to us at board level and see if we can kind of break the ice.
That would be great. I am happy to go talk to anybody, anytime, any place. But I am very encouraged by our conversations with TRPA, and we are looking at the second unit ordinance and then some of the regulations around the sites that were identified in the Tahoe Basin Area Plan for affordable housing, just to see how we might be able to streamline that review.
Well, they're aware of it, and I know that, but it's going to take some strong support at some point from both states at the state level, and perhaps even some federal encouragement. But we just got to unring that bell and get people more concerned about it, and hope that it finds its way through the legislature to get some freedom to do some things we can't do now. Thank you.
I would just add to that. I think Placer County obviously has a huge issue all over the county on this, but it's probably the most concentrated up at the North Tahoe region. And this workforce housing issue is huge up there, with people having to commute from Reno, which, as Larry stated, just plugs the roads up. So it's I can't believe that they have 13,000 buildable lots that they control right now. Is that what you said?
All the lots that the Conservancy has bought are not buildable. There's a large percentage of them that are buildable, but the larger percentage of them are not suited for building because they're stream zones or high hazard or steep or bad soils or whatever. But there is a large number of them that, particularly in the Kings Beach area, that's all with sewer, water, and streets committed, not paved, but just dirt subdivisions. And so we need to back up and say, maybe we took a run at this thinking we were doing the right thing initially and found out that we overlooked a key ingredient, because it's a strange phenomenon took place a few years back, and suddenly the local worker force discovered that their house was worth a great deal more to them in cash or money, so they were selling their homes and moving to Reno and other places where they could buy a house for far less and sell their old one. And so then you just lost all that workforce housing to people who were just coming up for weekends and stuff. So anyway, I'm just trying to outline it so everybody here has a little better grasp of what we have at the lake area.
Great.
And thanks for listening.
No. And then where it said keep it classy plaster, that was actually out of the 1600 freeform things. It popped out at me, made me giggle a little bit. But at the same time, it was, it's important. And I think anything that we are looking to do to address our housing needs here, it needs to be respectful of our communities and our neighborhoods and our way of living, so that we ensure that both we can meet a need, but that we're not doing something that is not going to be well received in the long run. So talk a little bit all the housing choices. This is really what we're looking at when we talk about some of the codes and ordinance changes that we are currently reviewing, where we looked for those best practices in other jurisdictions to see how they're addressing some of these. So mixed use, live-work type products, multifamily, senior housing, cluster housing, which includes things like co-housing and agri-hoods. We're seeing the agri-hood interest increase at this point. We have some coming to talk to us. This is a direct interest in preserving and protecting our agricultural lands, but while still allowing for some subdivision of those parcels for just to address the property owner's needs. Supportive housing, ADUs and junior ADUs, they are right now really being driven by the state. So most of our efforts has just been keeping up with the state and the rule changes on those. But one of the major comments that we got back, I think in both of the surveys, was to allow ADUs by right. And actually the county's been doing that since 2016. So clearly that information is not out there yet. So some of our work may just be more marketing or just letting people know what opportunities they have. And there's really no code or policy changes that are necessary. We're also co-living, looking at those duplexes, condos, and townhomes. We don't build a lot of those. And we're trying to look and see why that might be. We know a lot of it has to do with financing. And land costs, but we'd like to see if there's ways we can assist with that. Single family, small lot subdivisions, and then tiny homes, which we'll hear soon. So the housing strategy categories that are broken down really into these 5 areas. One is those policies and plans, looking where we might need to update those to help address the constraints that are out there. Regulatory relief, looking for incentives for housing development, streamlining the review process. And really key and important is preserving and protecting what we already have, and looking for ways where we could do some adaptive reuse of existing structures, maybe not necessarily built for housing the first time around, but maybe could be converted for housing as we go forward. And then local funding strategies, looking for fee processing and where we could reduce those fees. But we're also actually looking for ways that we could get more mainstream funding on a consistent basis. The county itself is not an entitlement community like the cities of Roseville or Rockland, where they get direct funding from HUD every single year. So every time we go for funding, we are in a competition with other jurisdictions. So we're now trying to explore where we might be able to have more steady stream of funding and ways that we might get there. So here's what's to come with the next year work program. You guys are actually seeing this first. It doesn't go to the board for 2 more weeks. But this is what we'll be working on coming next year. One, we'll want to final the master plan for the Placer Government Center. That's the plan that's here. And to help facilitate the development of Mercy Housing, which is the 79 units here on the campus. We'd also like to implement the Shaffer Mills Affordable Housing Sustainability Grant. We may not make next construction period, but we're hoping and we're wanting to try to get some things started with that funding. We will be initiating the CEQA analysis on the code updates. We are still working on pulling what those code updates will be in total and what that project will fully contain. But over this next year, once we have that, we'd like to initiate that CEQA analysis. We're also going to be doing the financial plan and investment strategy this year. It was actually tasked last year. We did a lot of research and got a lot of information, but we weren't able to pull that strategy together. We want to complete that this year. And then we would like to finalize the in lieu fee recommendation for the board so that they can take action. That is the in lieu fee is an option really available only to a few project types. It's generally only when there's a general plan amendment that increases the residential density. And so the county in the past has applied it in lieu fee, but it's been negotiated on a project by project level. This would give us an opportunity, if approved by the board, to have kind of the floor, a standard fee that by which we would start from for those projects that would have that obligation. Initiate the opportunity site area I talked about. We've identified about 100 plus parcels where they may be a potential for projects, and we'd like to advance that a little bit further and start really working with those property owners. That fee deferral update, process improvements. I got another slide. I'll talk more about that. Update the public awareness. The 6,600 is great, but we'd like to get more information out. Analyze second homeowners, again, going up to the Tahoe area and being able to see where we might be able to utilize some of those second homes. We're kicking off the 2021 housing element update next year. That I know it sounds a couple of years early, but really we do need to initiate that next year with what processes we're going to need, because it does need to be adopted by 2021. And then analyze institutional structure, internal and external, and that is really regards to the housing unit. We've been at it now for a little over a year. We've learned a lot, and we just wanted to take this year to reflect a little bit. Is this the best structure, or is there another structure that we should be considering as we move forward with housing programs and projects in the county? So I'm just about done here, and then we'll get on with the opportunity for the public to speak. So technology upgrades, as far as the process improvement, we have been spending a lot of time with this. Technology upgrades was kind of I think it was the number one request from project applicants about just wanting the county to embrace technology. So this is a great day to come in and be able to, kick off this with the new technology upgrades, some of them anyhow. So the county itself is going through an entire county-wide webpage update. CEDRA is going to be a big part of that, along with the sheriff and the Health and Human Services Department. All departments are getting an update, but because we're larger agencies, you'll see a bigger presence as far as that goes. We're also updating what we call it What's My Zoning. That is the parcel search tool that we have. We're adding more information to that so people can find out just more information about their parcels or any parcels they're looking at. And we are initiating an e-permit, an e-plan check process, and also expanding our payment options. This was following suit with the city of Roseville, who's already initiated this about 4 to 5 months ago. And they are, albeit some bumps in the road, they are appreciating the fact that most of their permits are now electronic. And then our public notification process. All of this we're kind of calling the virtual public counter. The idea is that the county essentially would be open 24/7, that anywhere, anytime you would be able to apply for a permit or find out information from the county. And so we are working with a company called Open Counter, who is helping us pull together a process by which people will be able to go in and search out what types of projects they want, what permits are going to be needed, what fee estimates are going to be. So I have a really brief video, and I'm hoping it works. Oh, it's right here. It did. So I'm going to go ahead and talk through the music as it goes. This is an example of the residential portal where you would come in and be able to determine that you want to build, in this case, a townhome it will pull up our actual zoning map and identify those areas where you would be able to build that type of project. Once you've selected that parcel, it then will go into the details of what you need to build such a project. And the beauty and the benefit of this type is it gives people that opportunity to kind of plug and play a little bit to see what types of projects they want. As you go through and click the buttons, it will start to actually estimate and update a fee estimate for you. And this is something that was also highly requested as we worked with the stakeholders and the applicants that have submitted projects through the county, is just more information, more readily information as they go. After it rolls through this section, it actually does hand you off to what we call a CELA, which is our permit processing, and you would be able to then kick in and do your electronic permit process. So this system is actually being reviewed right now. We're talking with the developer of that and have not entered into a contract yet with them. The e-permit side we actually are moving forward on. Building has already initiated some electronic permit processes, but this would also move over to planning and engineering as we grow the e-permit process. So now I'm going to go back to that. I'm so glad you're here. I think it's that one, yeah. So, and then to wrap all of this up, the last final thing that we are looking at is making it all voice command. So just like you can now say, Alexa, what's the weather today? The idea is that you would also be able to do this all via voice command as well. So you will start to see some of this rolling out over the next 6 to 8 weeks. It's really about a 6 to 8 month rollout. As we go through, we'll do some soft rollouts, and then as we figure things are working, you'll hear more about them, and we'll get it out. We also, more recently, out at the public counter, have updated our queue list, or when people come in for appointments, which allows them to register outside. That actually rolled out just last week, and we are getting ready to make more of a larger announcement about that, but we're working through some of those hiccups now. So, and this is it, and this is the housing info information. So the Placer County Housing Info, we do have a housing site. It is just the Placer County website, placer.ca.gov/housing. It'll take you into the site. Any and all information that we have related to housing, we're getting it up there as soon as we can. And we track a lot of the Planning Commission and board items so that people can go back and quickly reference them and be able to find that information. But this is where you can also sign up for the housing newsletter and for future flash votes. We don't actually plan another flash vote at this time, but we may very well in the future. So you can sign up for information there as well. And with that, I will stop.
Okay. Thank you, Shauna, for the presentation. And if I remember correctly, there is a video that you put together on what's happening with Placer County on housing. Do I remember right?
That was not the county at this point. We are planning on that.
Well, I thought I saw something that looked pretty impressive, so I'm trying to remember what that was.
If you do find that, let me know.
Okay, sorry.
That'd be good to see.
Sorry. But I'd like to talk about next steps. I mean, obviously, this is an informational item for us. We're taking no action today on this. And you mentioned that you're going to take it to the board on the 25th, which is 2 weeks out, and you're basically going to give them the same presentation, just an informational item. They will not be taking any action. You'll obviously want some feedback from them, as you probably get some feedback from us today. But what would be your hope to have a housing strategy defined to the point where you would come to us and come to the board for an actual decision on it? What would be your hope that would happen in the time frame? Because you talked about what's happening in 18 and 19. Is your hope by the end of 19, I would hope it'd be sooner than the end of 19, that you'd actually implement what you're proposing?
Right. So as it relates to code and policy changes,
Right.
a lot of this, if it's not related to code and policy changes, we'll just be continually coming back to you, letting know what we're
Right.
doing, particularly the technology updates
Right.
and those types of things. We are hoping to actually have a project description pulled together by end of this year, first of next year. We'll be bringing that around to everybody to talk about what proposed changes we'll be looking for or looking at for input by the Planning Commission. And Max and other public, and then we have to initiate the CEQA process, and that takes about a year or so before those codes would actually go into effect.
So I know that there's going to be a number of comments today from the public related to the in lieu fee. So any changes related to that are not going to happen for well over a year then.
No, so the in lieu fee is separate and apart. It is not. It's a revenue code. It's not part of the land use code. It's in Title 15.
Okay.
So that is
could
going.
happen sooner than-
Yeah. So I just want to clarify on the 25th that this will be there for them as well. There'll be a second item accompanying this, which is the annual work plan. That is an action item for the board on the 25th. And then we'll be taking two informational items on the in lieu fee in October. One here, Western Placer side for the in lieu fee recommendation, and then one up in the Tahoe area after that, based on the information received from the board and the public. We will bring back a final ordinance. So, by end of year, I think we would like to have that one.
The in lieu, you're saying?
Wrapped
as
up,
part
yeah.
of it.
Again,
Right.
it just depends on what direction we're given from the board and what they approve, but we would like to wrap that up by the end of the year.
Will you come back to this commission on any updates as it relates to
We
that?
can, absolutely.
And the in lieu fee, because that seems to be a pretty sensitive issue with a lot of folks. So, I know it's a sensitive issue here with the commission as well. So
Right, absolutely.
would
we can do that.
appreciate knowing that before the board actually takes some action on that, so that we could weigh in on it before that. So, okay.
Absolutely.
Any questions?
Nathan has some.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
just have a question about the plan. The housing plan seemed to be focused on ownership and building costs. I know that rentals might have some different aspects to that, and have you guys considered making part of the plan the consideration of renters?
Absolutely, and I apologize if that's what this sounded like. We're looking at all different types of housing, including renter-type products. Matter of fact, that's probably a substantial portion of what we're looking at. Most of our high-density housing is going to be on commercial multifamily sites, which is where rental would likely be.
I did have one question on the urban economics, BAE, and how they were kind of evaluating where the opportunities and constraints are as far as housing in Placer County. And being an Auburn resident, what jumped out to me is that in the next, say, 20 years, they said we could potentially have an addition of almost 8,000 more units in the Auburn area. And
Countywide.
It just said Auburn.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, yes.
And
yeah.
it was kind of like, okay, where are you going in Auburn to get nearly 8,000 units in the next 20 years? You've got a lot of infrastructure issues. We've got a lot of land that's already committed for one direction or another. And the other thing, as far as the western part of the region, and maybe they weighed in on it, I was trying to find it in this report, is the Placer County Conservation Plan that's coming up is obviously going to lock up a lot of land that's could have been maybe developed is not going to be developed, especially in the kind of the northern region out towards north of Lincoln and west of Lincoln. So I don't know if they took that into consideration, because we are going to have some pretty significant constraints to getting to some of the numbers they're talking about. So
Absolutely. And what they were really looking at is population forecasts and employment growth.
Right.
I mean, if that doesn't happen, then you don't need that. But based on where we're at today and what the forecasts are, then that's what we would need to accommodate.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't materialize and or there's constraints to that, then
right.
those are
Well,
what would
again, the constraints are there. I mean, the need may be there, but the constraints are there,
Right.
certainly from the land availability and the constraints of infrastructure. Because there was one project today that we continued that was having trouble going forward because the sewer lift station that they had to put in was so expensive that it made the project unfeasible.
Yep.
And my question is, if you can't make something work right now when the market is as hot as it is, when are you ever going to make it work? So,
Right. If not now, when?
Yeah.
So we've asked ourselves that
I
too.
just have I have one comment.
Yeah,
Unless you want, go ahead, Jeff.
I think we've got a couple. Do you want to go
Oh,
ahead?
yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I think it's pretty impressive, especially all that electronic stuff floating around the screen here. Because you do get to, like I said, plug and play and see what's even available. But what concerns me, and you can do a great job, and you are doing a great job here in Placer County and Roseville too, where I live. But all these mandates from the state, for example, in 2 years, every house has to have solar. If it's $1 million house, that might be a small percentage, but if it's 250,000 or even less, if affordability-wise, that becomes a bigger percentage. And there's other rules when you sell a house, you have to update it to almost every code, and basically it's better to tear it down rather than trying. So we're losing a lot of the existing one when they turn over because of regulation. Now, if they're safety items, and stuff like that, I'm not opposed to that. I'm just opposed to a lot of the other, we know better than you type deal, and that adds a lot of cost. How do we push back on that? Because it really does hinder our ability.
So
then we're going to look for funding from the state. Well, if they would do their job, we wouldn't have to look for so much funding.
Right. So the legislative advocacy, we're really pushing to be at that table where those decisions are being made. I personally participate on a number of those at the state level, and then through the CEO's office and through our lobbyists. Just trying to keep that kind of ideas in the forefront when these decisions are being made is important, and that's why it is a component.
Maybe if you
one
put
of the
another
top 4
category
components
there,
of this.
mandates that aren't safety related, how much in another chart, another column that the state is mandating that's driving up the cost. It'd be nice to know.
Well, and on top of that, we're going to have a statewide initiative relating to rent control. And when that comes into play, the number of people playing in the market to build them is going to drop substantially. And the ability to finance them is going to drop substantially.
Absolutely.
Do you have a comment?
Oh, no,
Sorry. I think this is an interesting discussion, and it's paramount because I can remember I was at a meeting several years ago with our governor, and he said there's going to be 7 million more people between San Francisco and Reno. That's us. I don't know what we're going to do with them or where we're going to put them, but we are a hot item, and I don't know how we're going to deal with it all if you keep adding a lot of regulation to what it makes the price just skyrocket. And I hope the state will at some point moderate some of their enthusiasm towards charging for all this stuff because they're going to make it almost impossible to accommodate. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Any other comment from the commissioners before we go on to the public? Okay, thanks, John. Appreciate your presentation. As I said earlier, and it appears that we probably have a number of people that want to comment on this, I would appreciate it. I know this is a very complex issue, got lots of moving parts to it that you could comment on, and we certainly are open and want to hear those comments, but if you could do your best to try to hold it to 3 minutes, I would greatly appreciate it, so that if you could just hit those high points. And what we're going to do is hopefully you have signed up. If you haven't, please sign up because, again, I want to do this in an orderly fashion. The planning director has a list, and he'll be calling you up as we get this started. So is there still a list over there if people have not signed up? And those of you who are hoping to speak during the tiny house, you heard that the comment from Shauna was that that's part of this strategy, so you can also add your comments to this as well. So I just want to make sure anybody else can sign up over there. So there is, Kara's telling me the list is still over there, so sign up. And I guess, EJ, we can start with the...
3 at a time so we can start.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is, yes, EJ, if you would just say who the first 3 are and if you do them in their order, and then so we can kind of keep people up and ready to go.
Sure. So we have about a dozen people signed up right now. I see a few more that are signing up. So I'll call 3 names. They go ahead and get in line, and you can address the commission at the podium, and then I'll call the next 3 names. So forgive me in advance if I mispronounce anybody's names. We'll start with Larry Welch, Janice, thank you, and Gary Mappa.
Yeah, and I know that EJ has mentioned the name, but if you could mention your name again as you speak, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Good morning, Larry Welch. I'm here representing the Placer Community Foundation Board of Directors. We're the proud authors of the video that you referenced.
Oh, there we go. I knew I'd seen it somewhere. And I would encourage anybody who hasn't seen that video to see it because it's an outstanding video.
I think it's got a lot of insight. Shauna made some great comments, kind of set me sideways on some things I was going to say, but I'll say them anyway, and we'll see how they relate. As you know, we're in an affordable housing crisis. It's a statewide crisis. We're constantly bombarded with news feeds, and now we've got a statewide ballot initiative with 60% of registered voters polling in favor of that initiative. We're in a real problem. We got a real trouble. I would respectfully disagree with a comment that was made that we've done a great job in Placer County delivering affordable housing. We're actually well behind the curve, and Shauna has outlined a lot of great work that's happened in the last year to get us going, but we're starting from way behind where we needed to be, so we've got a lot of work to do. Just kind of one statistic, over 40% of the people in Placer County pay more than 30% of their gross income for housing. I saw another stat, a Union Bank stat, that said 13% of the people in California pay more than 50% of their gross income on housing. So this is a big deal. It's acute in Placer County. We're a very high cost place to live, and we got a lot of work to dig out of it. I think we're on the right road, but there's a lot of things that have to be done. And one thing that's really clear is the things that we had done in the past prior to August 2017 just weren't working. The housing element was signed whenever it was created. We signed off on the strategy, but as the grand jury report said, the recent grand jury report said, that housing element was not driving the creation of policies, goals, targets, and action plans that actually created affordable housing. So we kind of just weren't really engaged. And then in addition to that, our fee in lieu strategy, which you referenced and asked questions about, of accepting fee in lieu instead of requiring construction of affordable units has completely failed. Over the past years, we've collected a meager $1 million from those fees. And those fees we have not spent. They sit in a trust fund. They haven't been used to create affordable housing. And we continue to do that until we get some new policies in place. So I applaud the question about fees and what we're doing about that. It's pretty clear that fee in lieu as an alternative to constructing of units in Placer just doesn't do it. It doesn't create housing. But despite all this doom and gloom, I was really encouraged. We're making progress. Shauna's done a great job of highlighting that. I want to thank you, Shauna, the staff, the supervisors, for the focus, for the energy, the commitment to making things different. We applaud the work that's been done to incorporate affordable housing into the DeWitt Master Plan. That's great stuff. We appreciate the additional staff. Thank you, Shauna. I'm gonna go faster, but it's important. We appreciate the resources, the outreach to the community, the new strategies and tools, and we're really excited to learn more and more about how this is going to get implemented. Just a few closing comments. When it comes to housing, we think that making construction of affordable housing should be a #1 priority for the commission, for the board, for the staff. We also think that fee and lieu payments should only be used as a last resort when we look to construct affordable housing units. We should build stuff, not collect fees. I don't think the county wants to be in the business of building. I think you guys are doing a lot of really important stuff, but actually building is something that we should probably avoid. In addition, fee and lieu amounts charged to developers should be significantly increased. We're extremely low compared to other jurisdictions. And then finally, we ask that the fee and lieu dollars that we have in the trust fund actually get spent on affordable housing. Thank you. I will get
That's
out
all
of
right.
here.
You're
So I just
representing,
thank you.
Larry,
Thanks
you're
for the time.
representing a group, so I'll give you a couple extra
Okay,
minutes.
thank you for that. In closing, thank you for the chance to address you on affordable housing crisis, and I encourage you to take whatever swift and bold actions are in your control that can drive the construction of affordable housing, and before the politicians and the ballot initiatives takes control away from us. We thank you for everything you've done. Thanks for the chance to comment.
Thank you for your comments, Larry.
Janice LaRue, I'm a Colfax area resident. I live in unincorporated Placer County, but I'm also the executive director for the First Five Placer Children and Families Commission, and we, together with the Community Foundation, have worked to raise this issue because it so much impacts children and families in our county. You may have, over the past couple of years, attended a couple of conversations that we've had to raise awareness of the importance of children and families in our area, just for the purposes, apart from the whole feel-good thing about how important it is to support children and families, how much we need them for our own economic viability. And we simply do not have enough children to basically support our economic growth and development. We really need this place, Placer County, to be a place that attracts and keeps children and families to assure our future progress. And currently, it's really hard to raise a family in Placer County. Well over half of our families do not make a minimum standard of, meet the minimum standard of living. For a family in Foreign Placer, it costs about a minimum to live here is about $70,000 a year. And about half of our families don't earn that. And they are really strapped with respect to the rental availability, which is almost nil, and the cost of housing. And so this is an area, this is an issue that really impacts us very deeply, not only just because we need to keep families here, but families who are under stress, we see a lot greater incidents of risky behaviors, child abuse, health outcomes, adverse health outcomes, which really affect our whole well-being of our community. And so this is an issue that we've been tracking very seriously, and we really applaud the efforts of Shauna and her team and the work that's been commissioned by this commission. Certainly for the work that you're doing to increase housing. Oh my God, are you serious?
No. That's the 1 minute warning. 1 minute.
I was just winging this. And I thought, oh, this will be quick. But also to raise awareness of the issue, considering what we're looking at in terms of legislation coming down, I think it's really important that the county keeps putting this message out about how important it is to raise your voice and get involved. So again, I really appreciate the concern about affordable housing. As Larry mentioned, we are behind the ball on this. We really need to make sure that this is addressed, and especially the fee in lieu. We can't emphasize this enough. We can't let, I know all of the burdens are great on builders, but they're great across the state, and we really need to do what communities like Roseville have done to really make sure that we meet the needs of the moderate and low income folks, to keep people here so that we have a workforce and families who can live here. Bye.
Thank you.
So Gary Moppa is up next. After that is going to be Christina Nicholson, Norma, first name only, and Herb Whitaker.
Yep, I'm Gary Mappa, Applegate. Thank you very much for a great presentation. There's so many puzzle pieces to this housing issue. I'm just going to focus on just one issue, and first thing would be a question to planning, if they can answer it. Granny flats and ADUs, how many permits were issued in 2016, 2017, and to date this year for granny flats?
We talked about 16 units. Was that in the last year or last?
It runs about 15 to 16 units
a year.
Okay, so let's say 15 units a year is embarrassing. When you consider the population in Placer County, whether it's incorporated or unincorporated, so there seems to be a big gap in providing housing, at least in that category. And part of what I brought up before to several people is financing is a major burden. It's hard to get financing for a secondary unit. So I've asked many people several times if there's any way of looking at Empower and the bonding program so you can develop something similar. When I put solar on my house, I wouldn't have done it if it had not been for Empower. So in my mind, Empower is fairly successful. The downside to Empower, of course, is when you go to sell your house or do something with it, you're dealing with Fannie Mae or Ginnie Mae, and all of a sudden you've got to come up with the cash to pay it off. But I would like the county to maybe look more into some type of financing for secondary dwellings that we can't get. A lot of your property owners can't get a second on their property, or they can't get an equity line, or they just won't qualify for a secondary dwelling. So we're not giving the opportunity to increase the housing stock with the granny flat ADUs. So I think it's something that maybe should be investigated. And I would also like to know the statistics on if I went in to develop a granny flat, each one of those had fees that were paid, fire fees, school impact fees, and those numbers, you really don't have that information put out. So if I wanted to go do a granny flat, until I walk into the counter and they tell me it's going to cost you 40 grand, you got to redo your well, you got to do this to your septic, all of a sudden it's restrictive and prohibitive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
I think I was next. Yeah, but in front of somebody. Didn't want to do that. Hi, I'm Christina Nicholson, and I am the co-owner and director of Whole Person Learning, which is a small organization in Placer County that's been in the community over 30 years now. And I was looking back, and I've actually been working with youth and families in Placer County for 25 years now. So I've seen a lot of changes, and I really appreciate what's currently happening in terms of housing and what's starting to become available for youth, young adults, and families within this community. So I'm very hopeful about what can continue to happen as we look forward in the future. So thank you very much for that. I also strongly advocate for building affordable housing rather than even considering in lieu fees. If there's any way possible to have that, you know, even the last resort or something, if anything, some kind of standardized, if it has to even be a part. The reasons why I so strongly support constructing affordable housing, Janice mentioned a little bit about current demographics. Just from a demographic perspective, I'm sure we've had a couple of town hall meetings, and the U.S. Census Bureau talks about older people are projected to outnumber children for the first time in U.S. history by 2030. So all baby boomers will be older than 65. And in that older population, 1 in every 5 will be at retirement age. So by 2035, we'll have more people over age 65 than we will have people under that age to be able to support and care for that retirement age. Within this community, our statistics show us that we have that same number of people age 65 and up. 113% between 2014 and 2015, that population of people age 65 and up grew 113%. So that's just going to continue to increase. So our young people and the younger population are that population that we'll be supporting and caring for, and we'd like to be able to have those people be able to afford and live and work and play, definition of community, within our communities. From an employer perspective, over 50% of our staff cannot afford to live in Placer County, so they do not live here. They have to commute. That doesn't meet with one of the goals of trying to have shorter commutes. And then the other piece, just looking from, we provide transitional housing for young individuals, and when they complete our 2 or sometimes 3-year program, they can't afford to stay here. So they go across the bridge and go apply at Citrus Heights, because over there, their rent's going to be at least $400 cheaper than it is residing in Placer County. So I'd really like to encourage all of you to just continue to fight the good fight and help us have affordable housing and help us have a community where we can have people that work here that are a part of a community, a part of the community that they live in while they're caring for us as we continue to grow older. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, who's up next, DJ? Norma, is she still here? I guess Norma's left. There you go. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Herb Whitaker. I'm the managing attorney of the local office of Legal Services of Northern California. We represent low-income residents in Placer County, and I can tell you from my civil legal aid program that housing is our #1 priority issue because it impacts our clients so much. So the first thing that I want to do is endorse the comments that were made by many of the speakers prior to me, and so I won't repeat many of those issues that they talked about, but I do agree with what the previous speakers have said. First, in terms of the need for housing, this is more than just a statistic. My office deals every day with families that are in crisis because they're losing their housing, their affordable housing, or they cannot find affordable housing. They're getting evicted, or they're getting priced out, or they've got money. Maybe they even have a Section 8 voucher, but they cannot find housing in Placer County. That's become a crisis that with voucher programs, people can't find landlords who will accept the vouchers because they can charge higher rents to other people. Now then, in terms of the need for housing, I would submit that what Placer County needs to do is to push on every single issue, every single program that it possibly can in order to facilitate the support of affordable housing. And one of the reasons for that is because right now we are failing. It's an abysmal failure. The grand jury has called Placer County out and indicated that they have failed to meet their affordable housing, and the statistics bear this out as well. So what I would like to do is call your attention to the Placer County's annual housing element report. And the report that says that as of the year 2017, looking at housing construction over a period of 8 years in the areas of very low-income housing and low-income housing, the regional fair share numbers were 2,322 units for low and very low. How many have we built? 121. We barely scratched the surface in the first 5 years. And most of that housing came from Quartz Ridge, which was one project. There have been a few other projects as well, but Quartz Ridge was the main thing. Now, what I want to do is highlight the fact, though, that we are building housing. So we have built, there was a demand for 1,773 above moderate income units, and we have built 1,472 above moderate income units. We've achieved 88% of the goal for the 8-year period, and we still have 3 years to go. So the point is, housing is being built, but it's not being built for low-income people. If I can have just one more minute. What I would like to do then is to emphasize 2 specific programs. First is the in-lieu fee proposal. And I would agree with the previous speakers that a couple of things. One is that the proposal that's been placed before the county endorses in-lieu fees for residential projects and also for non-residential or for commercial projects. And I would certainly endorse the prospect of fees for the commercial projects to help support affordable housing. Second, I think that what we need is an inclusionary policy similar to what they've got in Roseville so that we will have the units actually built instead of in-lieu fees being collected. Roseville demonstrates that this kind of policy can work. The reports show that Roseville has produced over 3,000 low-income units, moderate low or very low-income units, and they have done that by having the units built rather than just collecting the in-lieu fees. Now, developers will tell you, well, that this is not going to work, but Roseville demonstrates that it will work. I also ask you to take a look at the BAE report that has been submitted in support of the in lieu fee program, and the other study that was supported in support of the in lieu fee program. And one of the things that they concluded was that if you impose the maximum in lieu fee program, this will not have a major impact on discouraging the development of affordable housing. One of the reasons is because a lot of the housing demand we're getting in Placer County is from the Bay Area, where people are cashing out with their multi-million-dollar units. They're coming to Placer County, and they're getting a bargain if they buy a $600,000 unit. So that's where a lot of the demand is coming from in Placer County. So I would recommend that we have maximum in lieu fees. I would recommend that we do not collect those fees, but require that the housing be built and that the fees only be accepted as a last resort. My final recommendation would be that Placer County gets staffing that actually pushes the development of affordable housing. That is one of the reasons that the Roseville program has worked, is because they have staffing on the ground that looks at each project and works with the developers to make sure that there's an affordable component. And I don't believe that we've got that right now in Placer County. So thank you very much for your patience and time.
Thanks for your comments. Now, who's next, EJ?
Carol Carter.
Okay.
I'm Reverend Carol Carter. I'm a retired United Methodist pastor. I've lived in Auburn now for 6 years. I'm here to represent a larger group of people who are the people who attend the churches and synagogues and other places of worship in this county. Many of us have been working together, and our major efforts are to care for the poor in our community. That is our mandate in Scripture, and that is what we seek to do in a practical way every day here. We absolutely agree with previous speakers. I do not need to repeat except to say, yes, the in lieu fees seem to be a major factor preventing the building of affordable housing in Placer County. And so we object to that. We feel that it's very, very important to ask people who are building to build those affordable units that are mandated statewide. So I urge you to support that kind of action, and as soon as possible. I know many people who are very, very poor who I meet in my ministry. Even though I'm retired, I keep working all the time. And I work with a program that works specifically with very poor families, trying to make it, trying to get out of extreme poverty for the sake of their families. And housing is a major issue for all of them. And to find housing that is affordable when you're poor in this county, very difficult. And the consequences of not having secure housing are great on children, on families, on old people like me, who are baby boomer generation, long time ago arrived here on the planet. I rent a house now, and the rent is very high. And if something should happen to me or to my husband, we would have difficulty staying here. So I encourage you to take very seriously. People of faith are asking you to care for the poor, to take them as a high priority, the highest priority perhaps, because people who have wealth can care for themselves. But people who are poor need the county to care about them and to take action. So I underline all previous statements and appreciate all the people who have worked so hard to make it clear that we should be a county that has hospitality and generosity toward every single person here. And I thank you for that wonderful report.
Thank you. EJ, who's
Anthony.
Next?
Anthony R. We'll move to Ken Larson.
Is Anthony still here? Okay.
Good morning for a few more minutes. My name is Ken Larson. I'm a 34-year resident of Placer County, and I'm on the board of the Placer Community Foundation. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and the foundation, but mainly for myself. A lot of the issues that we're dealing with have been pointed out already, so I'm not going to bore you with that. What I'd like to do is just talk about what I think is some encouraging news, and that is I'm really encouraged to see how far we've come over the last couple of years in terms of the discussion about addressing affordable housing. There wasn't much discussion a couple of years ago, in fact, and things have really changed for the positive. And I think there are a lot of people working to address the need. The conversation's really changed. We now have a number of options that could be used as part of the strategy and tactics to increase workforce housing. And we know that there's not one option alone that will solve our situation. So if people come talking about silver bullets, you're wise enough to know that that's not going to get us there. With the Community Development Department leading the way, the Planning Commission, the Board of Supervisors, and the public looking at and exploring options, this is how we're going to make things move ahead. We know that other entities have figured out how to make progress. We talked about Roseville, but they're not the only one. And we feel we can too. There's a lot of bright people in this room, and I think we can figure out how to make it work here in Placer County. We need to use creativity, however. We can't use the same old systems and expect to get different answers, so we have to be creative. We probably can't cut and paste from others. That there's just an ingrained resistance to doing so, but we should leverage where we can and create what we need to for our particular environment. We need all to participate in finding solutions. We need the development community who know the business inside and out. They've built a lot of different development across the foothills and the flatlands, and they know how to get it done. We need to get them engaged in a more deep level at helping to find solutions. It's a lot of give and take, and with the policy leadership of the Board of Supervisors, the knowledge of the Community Development Agency and the Planning Commission, and the developers committed to moving Placer County ahead, support for finding a solution from the public, the time is right. Again, I commend the Commission, the Development Department, and the Board of Supervisors for moving this discussion forward. I assure you we in the community will stay engaged as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Who's up next, DJ?
So next up, last name Brost, first name Valen.
Okay. They
Not close enough to get
I would
anybody.
say they left unless you tortured their name.
Could have been. Jane Worst.
Okay.
Jane Worst? I must have been doing a really bad job here.
Okay.
Here's a popular name, Tom Jones. Tom Jones?
I think he left the room.
Callie Mcdonald? Or McDonald, last name? Gary, it looks like a Callie.
Okay.
You do not look like a Callie.
Yeah, you wouldn't be the first. My name is Gary McDonald. I'm the Executive Director of Lighthouse Counseling and Family Resource Center in Lincoln, though we serve all of western Placer County. We serve about 3,000 people. 98% of them are low income. Many of them are multi-generational families living in the same one-bedroom apartment because they can't afford to have their own room. Some of them are sleeping on the floor. I also serve on the Economic Development Committee for Lincoln. I'm the Vice Chair. I'm on the Lincoln Community Foundation, and I used to serve on the Manitou Springs, Colorado, the Planning Commission. So I do have some experience in Planning Commission. I was also the Vice Mayor of Manitou Springs. So the only way that you're going to be able to meet the housing needs of Placer County is if you mandate affordable housing be built by eliminating the fees in lieu. If there's fees in lieu of, they will use them. So you need to mandate housing. The only way to do that is to get rid of the in lieu fees. I would also recommend, a lot of this is covered in your plan, but easing the regulations, allowing greater variances, encouraging mixed use, reducing fees for the developers, subsidizing building costs. There's also something that was somewhat touched on, the graying of America. In 1945, Social Security ratio, there were 42 people working to every one person collecting Social Security. In 1960, it went to 5 to 1. In 2018, it was 2.9 to 1. By 2030, it's going to be 2 to 1. The Social Security Trustees' annual report says by 2033, they're going to be unable to pay full benefits. It takes more than 3 people working, more than 3 to 1 ratio to support Social Security. So you can see what's going to happen. Eventually what's going to happen is people that are the graying of America, they're not going to be able to afford where they're living. So if there isn't additional affordable housing for the elderly people when they get to that age, where are they going to wind up? You're going to find more and more elderly people living on the streets. It's already happening. It's already happening. We see every day people come to Lighthouse. They've had a medical bill. They don't have insurance.
They got divorced. The wife with children, they're living in their car. Without affordable housing, you're going to have more and more people on the street. It's already happening. In 2016, the homeless count for Lincoln was 30. 2018, 2 years later, it's 80. It went from 30 to 80 in 2 years. So unless you get rid of fees in lieu of, it's going to get worse. And it's in your hands. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for your comments. Do you have any more on the list there?
Last two on the list I have are Sue Thompson and Antoinette Fabula.
Good afternoon. I'm Sue Thompson, and I'm on the Placer Community Foundation, and I'm also a realtor of 40 years in this area, so I've had a lot to do with housing. I wanted to say that the paradigm for housing has changed. You know, many buyers aren't willing to spend the first half of their lives working to acquire a home and then the second half maintaining it. What they're looking for is a shift, as was pointed out, from live and work in our county to live, work, and play in our county. People are really wanting to have more personal time with their families. Achievable housing is necessary for the health of our community. I think the underlying housing is healthy. Exploring the possibility of tiny homes and other housing solutions is essential. And I support actual housing in lieu of fees. As the LA mayor pointed out, the cure for achievable housing is achievable housing. And I want to thank Shauna. She's wonderful, and I've just really enjoyed working with her personally. And I'm also so impressed with the work that she's done in just a very short time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'm sorry, AJ, who was next?
Antoinette Fabula?
I don't see anybody jumping up. Is that the end
That's
of the
everybody
list?
who's on the list, so.
Okay, is that the end of the list?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody who did not sign up would like to speak? Okay, I guess I'm going to close the public hearing part of that. I'll go ahead and close it and bring it back to the commission for any comments or questions that they may have with first Shauna. Okay. Richard?
Comment on this. I guess we heard that in lieu fees are not the way to go.
Yeah, I think that's
But did I hear earlier in our meeting that the County Board of Supervisors are already going to be discussing a proposal for in lieu fees or a new schedule or?
Shauna, you want to kind of clear that up?
Just briefly, where is that at?
Yes, so in October, both meetings, one on the western and one on the eastern side of the county, will be discussing an action on in lieu fees. Back in 2016, the board authorized a study to be done on them. Currently, the county does levy in lieu fees on certain projects. It is applied on a case-by-case basis. And so what the board will be considering is where they want to apply those and how much, and or if they want to even continue with the in lieu fee.
Right.
At this point, October is only a discussion based on the feedback we get back. Then staff will bring back whatever follows up from that board direction.
You might want to tell them what we heard here today.
Absolutely.
Well, as I understand, Shauna, you have developed a proposal for how to address the in lieu fee. Maybe you're still working through kind of refining that at this point.
Based on public comments received.
But my understanding is that the kind of go forward sort of approach to this is that you're taking direction from the board, who already stated previously a year ago that they do not like in lieu fees and that they would like to see a program that more builds than offsets it with an in lieu fee. So as I understand, the direction you're moving in is more towards a build it approach. So I know you're still refining that at this point, but the in lieu fee as it stands today is going to be very different than it going forward once that's implemented, or potentially, I mean, the commission
Should
and the
the
board
board-
have to
should the
take
board
that
approve.
action, but that's where the direction that you're taking,
Yes.
as I understand. Okay, thank you.
Just
Go ahead,
an observation here in my simple mind. Anytime there's a fee, whether it be an in lieu fee or a build it fee or whatever the fee is, it obviously drives up the cost of the homes that are being built. Every increase in the price of the home being built eliminates a number of people who can qualify to buy that home, thus creating more people who are in need of the affordable housing. It's kind of, I'm not sure how that's going to work in the long run. Where you're in an attempt to solve the problem, we're creating a larger need for it.
And yes, we've heard that. Definitely have heard that concern as well. And right now, we're trying to stay rooted in the policies as they're adopted in the general plan, which, as I mentioned earlier, are really just limited to projects that have general plan amendments as part of them that increase the density. In those policies, it allows for build on-site, off-site, or pay an in lieu fee. And as I mentioned, and as was Commissioner Nader also mentioned, is about a year ago the board, preferred when that obligation is, and there's not many cases when it is, but when it is, their preference would to see it be constructed. That being said, there are just time to time when an in lieu fee seems appropriate, and so I think that's really what is trying to be determined here is when that policy is supposed to be applied. When and how is it applied? But the board all has the opportunity to reconsider the policy, and we're not forgetting that as we go forward. That option will be presented to the board, that if they should choose to revisit the policy, they have that option. They're the board of supervisors. So.
Okay. Next, I think there's others that want to comment. Nathan,
I just had a question, because it was commented on that at times there's a staff person that's assigned to focusing on affordable housing. Do we have that at the county level? Is there someone?
That'd be
okay. And so that's good. It's good to know that that's there. And your presentation was great. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm passionate about affordable housing and have a lot of questions about the in lieu fee, and am interested in those funds being used and maybe understanding more about the plan. We have fees, we have dollars, and how will those be used?
We do, and that was part of the finance implementation plan. We have $1 million. $1 million doesn't go really far, and we want to make sure that we're investing that wisely and getting the best rate of return on that. So that's why this year we will be spending time talking about both those fees and any other funding that we're able to pull together on how best to invest that in support of affordable housing. That's that housing finance strategy that we're talking about.
before the next comment, Greg or Jeremy, could you change the screen? We're not going to be talking about tiny houses. Thank you.
Move that.
All right, Larry, do you have some comments?
Well, just a updating of what we're doing at TRPA. We're now entertaining the idea of allowing secondary units on existing homes that are already created, so like a garage apartment situation. And there seems to be some support for that, and I think that's probably the best we can do in the short term, but I think we need to look at allowing it in certain areas because I think it will help alleviate some of the need for employee housing and that sort. I don't know whether we can look at that type of a program countywide as easily, but we were.
So the county already does. We already have a secondary dwelling ordinance that's been amended once in 2016 and once in 2017. It does allow those units by right where those units are allowed. So say CC&Rs or other homeowner constraints where those aren't allowed, then the county's policies doesn't override that. but there are a few standards they do have to meet, and they do still have to pay fees. So we're always continually looking at that. There are some changes yet again coming down from the state on that very subject matter, and so we're waiting to see what's signed by the governor, and then probably be bringing back some recommended revisions on that one again as well.
Yeah, everything you create that seems like a good idea seems to always create a management issue somewhere along the line, and that's always the issue that gets the toughest to resolve. And I think that as we move through this process, it's we've had so many developments through my lifetime. As an example, in Martis Valley, and we set aside employee housing areas, and they were required to do it. And then, strangely enough, the employees themselves in some cases came out and said, we don't want to live and work in the same location. We want to live, not be told where we had to live. So, you get these strange twists on, and it becomes chaotic in trying to deal with it, because you're trying to help a group of people, and in some cases, they don't want to be helped. But it's hard to work your way through it. It's kind of craziness, but I think we're getting our arms around it, and I think we're just going to have to be big, strong kids and find a way to make it happen. But it's very difficult. It's just not going to happen easily. The prices are escalating so fast in all the areas, here in Tahoe as well, that it's making it almost prohibitive because of land costs, for example. And so I don't know the answer. I'm just talking about the problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Any other comments?
Yeah, one thing, if you could address incentives to applicants to build housing. Are there any incentives that are in the plan? I'm coming back a number of years ago, was community development director in Breckenridge, Colorado, and we had a housing crisis, and we provided significant incentives for builders to build housing, and within 2 years we had too much housing. But it does take a look at, do you want to give those incentives, increased floor area, reduced parking, a number of things that might encourage a developer to actually go out and build the housing.
So we're hitting on that in a couple of different areas. One is the reg reform, so looking at site standards, setbacks, height limits, lot coverage, parking requirements. And we're also looking at just streamlining that review process, trying to get people in and out of here quicker, because we hear time is money. And we also hear we don't understand the process. And so to the video, it's an opportunity for maybe those that are not necessarily developers or builders, but have a piece of land and they want to try something, for them just kind of understand what it looks like without having to schedule an appointment and come in, and they'll be able to take a look at that. And then as far as incentives goes, we're also looking at where we can offset those fees, maybe using some of the $1 million or other fees that we're getting. So we're trying to hit those incentives in a number of different ways, in hopes to just increase the construction of housing.
Okay.
Anyone else? Shauna, again, thank you for the presentation. The one comment that I want to follow up on Commissioner Rakuchi's comment is that as you make this presentation on the 25th of the supervisors, as you're going through the list of things that you're working on, I would hope that you would highlight the in lieu fee as a instead of just saying, okay, we're working on that, of saying there was a lot of discussion on that at this meeting. So
absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of our meeting. Thank you, everybody, for coming and your patience as we kind of work through this process.